What's up, everybody? Welcome to Heresy Financial. My name is Joe Brown, and this is the channel where we talk about financial topics and education and news in a way that is considered heresy to the typical financial mainstream sources out there. Today, I'd like to share with you guys two books that I've recently read. They're pretty good. Just want to give you a review on them just in case you were looking at them and you were considering reading them yourself. The first one is called Aftermath, and it's by James Rickards. The second one is called The Forgotten Depression, and it's by Jim Grant. Let's dive in. All right, guys, two short book reviews for you today. This first one is James Rickards' latest book. It's called Aftermath. This one, Aftermath, is the latest in what he calls a quartet, a series of 4 books. I've also read one other of his books in this series. I read The Road to Ruin and Aftermath, this recent one. To be honest, I wouldn't recommend it to everyone. It's not as useful in terms of the information that he talks about and spends a lot of time writing about in this book. He spends a lot of time just kind of discussing his professional work history, especially, a time that he did at the CIA. It really doesn't fit in with the overall, theme of the 4 books that he's written about financial information. It seems kind of out of place, like he was trying to find stories from his life that he could fill this book up with. Now, the financial information that is included in this book, such as a brief history of our nation's GDP, debt, taxes, and the administrations that govern those things. That was a very interesting portion of the book. And there's some other good information in there. Pretty much the whole book just kind of points towards, if you're going to be investing, make sure you're buying a lot of gold. He usually recommends at least 10%. But again, like I said, if you want that message with a little bit more financial oomph to back it up, some of his other books are going to provide a lot more bang for your buck on that. This book kind of just feels like he wanted to write another book and didn't really have a lot to write about. So if you got a lot of time on your hands and you've read him before and you like the material and the way that he writes, go for it. It's not a bad book. It's not unenjoyable. It's just not as useful or practical as some of his other books. And I will say it is a lot less conspiracy theory-esque than his other books. His other books borderline a lot more on just way out there crazy. Like he's grasping at straws, borderline conspiracy theory on some of the stuff that he talks about and alleges is true in financial, political history, etc. The second book here that I wanted to tell you guys about is called The Forgotten Depression, written by Jim Grant. It's about the 1921 depression that cured itself. Fascinating book here. Absolutely wonderful. I would recommend it to anybody who's not intimidated by a book that uses tons of real information. So he goes really into detail on numbers and GDP numbers and interest rates and debt numbers and tax numbers and financial health of corporations and companies. And he goes really into detail, includes a lot of documentation, painfully so. I mean, it's, kind of boring in some parts, but really what that means is it's extremely well documented. And basically the premise of the book is it shows this depression. It's called The Forgotten Depression because nobody ever talks about it. Nobody ever discusses it. And it's because it was the last time we had a depression or a severe correction in this country that the government didn't step in and try and fix. And because of that, it cured itself, fixed itself, and led to the Roaring '20s. So the recovery and the health that depression, that recession caused was far greater than anything that the government has been able to produce in any of their interventions in subsequent crashes, recessions, and depressions since then. This was a time when the Federal Reserve still 100% viewed the dollar as 100% tied to gold. They didn't view money as anything other than gold. They didn't view their role as manipulating the economy. They didn't look at their role as trying to increase employment. They didn't view their role as trying to stabilize prices. This was basically a time that had been preceded by excessive inflation and excessive speculation. So this crash, this depression was basically the cure for all that malinvestment, the misallocation of funds. And so the resulting deflation during this depression was the cure for the prior inflation, prior speculation that had occurred. And so the market took care of itself. It did what it was supposed to do. The pricing mechanisms worked, and it was an extremely painful period of time, but it was short-lived and corrected itself, and people got back up on their feet really quickly, leading to almost a full decade of extremely good business results, employment, wealth, production, and overall well-being for the country. It's kind of funny because Herbert Hoover was around at the time. He obviously wasn't the president, but he was around at the time, and he looked very critically at the government's lack of response and lack of action in trying to deal with the Depression at the time. And so he came up with this whole plan of what he would do in a situation like that. And ultimately, when he was in power, when he was the president during the Great Depression, he started implementing a ton of interventionist policies, trying to get the economy back on its feet again, ultimately making things a lot worse. And his successor, FDR, criticized Hoover for what he was doing during that time. It ultimately won him the election, and he went on to intervene even more, drawing out the length and the severity of the Depression and the hard times even longer. So they took a direct opposite approach to economic hardship, recession, depression, financial crises, and pretty much came out with an exact opposite result. The first Depression in 1921, it lasted a very short amount of time, and it corrected itself and led to extreme economic recovery afterwards, whereas when they intervened and tried to help it out themselves during the Great Depression, it made everything a lot worse, made everything last a lot longer. Now, he doesn't go as much into detail on the Great Depression, 1929 stock market crash and all that. This is mainly focused on that initial crash, the first Depression in 1921. Ultimately, it's a fantastic book if you can deal with the boring details. I'd highly recommend it. And if you are interested in buying either of these two books, I have linked both of them in the description below. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe button. That really helps the channel out. And if you would like more videos like this where I give brief explanations and reviews on books that I've read, let me know in the comments below, and I'll continue to do this from time to time going forward. Thank you so much for watching. You guys have a great day.